So I finished Aoi Tori, and I wasn't really a fan of it, and part of it is dependent on your mindset, or rather your perspective of what the title's going for. For the longest while, I was going with a different title of just like Max Horny, and that's kind of a joke from the title I gave for Amatsusumi, where I felt like it was having an identity crisis of whether it wanted to focus on the plot or the fan service. But the second half, I wanted to go with something along the lines of like, oh, the FF13 of Purple Soft, due to the like similarities of dragging quite a bit until you hit a point where it's like, oh, it's all smooth sailing from now on. But I'll get back to the point later on. Aoi Tori, just by its name, is a reference to the bluebird. It's an old play about two kids trying to find a really blue bird to help out this like other sick kid. I read through it during sales round and it was still like quite fun. You can go through it pretty quickly. The kids journey through multiple, I guess you'd call like planes of existence to try to find like the bluebird. There's a theme going for it. It ends with leaving it open-ended to have like an audience to think about like on their own, and it's one of those things where like I'm skipping over it because you might want to read it yourself or just skip it entirely until after you like finish the VN. It was a weird experience for me because I had like no recollection of reading it before, but I did know like parts of it. I thought maybe the library staff played it when I was a kid, but it ended up being that I just watched a movie with like Shirley Temple, and it's like, oh shit, I remember this crap. It's a lot different from the original play. Anyways, you don't really need to know anything about it, mainly because the characters themselves go over the important parts of it in the final route. Anything of importance would be covered, and you can kind of have like fun retroactively piecing the sum of the parts together. So it's more of a preference if you want to know it all when you start, or if you want to save it until the end, but it still wouldn't ruin the VN itself if it went over nothing. There's a couple of VN titles that kind of go through the same idea, and overall you never really need to know the source material to enjoy the VNs. Some of them can even end up spoiling you on some reviews that would have been handled later on, so it's like, hey, pick your poison, I guess. So now I'll be talking about the premise, or rather what you can glean from the description. Sure, you can go in blind, and that's its own thing I'll mention later. So you look at V&B or any of the stores, I'm pretty sure almost everything has like the same description. These are kind of long, so I'm just gonna put it on the screen or whatever. So the whole thing's like, oh, here's the first one, where it's like, oh yeah, anything he touches, you know, he has this power, it brings bliss and whatever, and it's like a sexual nature too. It's like, okay, so this makes it sound like it's a Nukige, okay. And I was like, ah, that's kind of sucks for me. For some others I know, it's like, hey, this is great, right? So the second part is like, oh, he's burdened by the death of this girl, and you know, his strength is his resolve to make others happy, and the constant mix of like, oh, horny all the fucking time or trying to be helpful just makes him barely hold on to his sanity. It's like, okay, that's interesting. It's like a psychological thriller thing. It's also the reason why I was interested to begin with. It's like, alright, this can be great. So what actually happens the first minute is like an H scene. On the other hand, it ended quite fast. I'm like, alright, hey, these aren't so bad. These are gonna be fast, a minute each. Alright, you know, you can see from the title, you can see from the description, it's like, alright, this is what it's gonna be. Only it was a trap, because that scene was not even counted as an H scene in the gallery. The actual H scene happens almost immediately afterwards, and has like 70 iterations of these 3 CGs. This scene is fucking long, but it's basically the same length if you read like Amatsusumi's like first scene as well. And the following sections don't even cover the second part of the description it talked about. It covers like the third part, and it's about Mary, so she's one of the leads, and her thing is like, oh, she's a vampire. Now I forgot to mention some parts are hard to go around without any spoilers. But anything I'm covering is like specific in what happens in like the first hour or two. The beginning section with Mary really got me, because sure, the set piece and Amatsusumi had a lot more impact going for it, but it's also like 3 times longer. It's like, holy shit, this is actually good, right? Basically, it was a great way to start the VN. It shows what they know how to do, and they're doing it fine, and they already got their like initial theme set for Mary. It's like, oh, this is awesome, right? It's just that they're also really fucking horny. Throughout the plot, there's like 16 H scenes, and there's like another 9 extra H scenes later in the gallery. One which felt like it lasted like half of a normal route. It was basically a joke where it felt like they were aware that this title felt like a Nukige at times, and half of these scenes go on forever, and to the point where some routes felt like only 1/3 of the length for the plot, and everything else is like, okay, here's some background info that's not even necessary because it's about the plays and shit, and the rest is for the H scenes. And then like, for the last 2 parts of the plot, it's like, holy shit, we forgot about the plot, let's do it now. Honestly, the 2 extra H scenes in the end, I think it's called the other, it feels like they get randomly unlocked. I guess they just get released whatever like route you pick first, but I chose to do the teacher, who had nothing to do with any of these people, especially one where I think the character talked like one line the whole route. If she was even there, I don't even remember her. Remember her in Mary's route. Even by the end, I think that character had maybe like 20 lines max. Like, holy shit, you people pay attention to this character. In the end, this title's close to Nukige until the last route, where it still has a bunch of H scenes, but the plot is consistently in the front instead of like in the last few sections. There's nothing wrong with the H scenes, the art is great, and some of them are tied to the plot itself, whilst others target what the character is going through. It's just that they're really fucking long. Like, the title itself felt like maybe 15 hours if you took out all of the H scenes. The V&B average is like 28 hours, like how the hell did you get that? So I guess maybe the normal range is like 20 to 25, something like that. I saw one was like, oh, it's 100 hours, like, oh, I'm learning I'm learning the language. Like, okay, makes sense. I would probably take longer. So by the end of the common route, you have one choice that will send you 1 to 3 routes. Mainly about Mary having a chance to write a play, and she wants the MC to choose the female lead to help him fall in love with someone. She thinks it might counteract like the powers, but it's more of like wishful thinking. By now you understand that the main character has like the power to suck up negative emotions, and I think it comes up immediately in like the first 20 minutes. I already mentioned Mary and that her part of the common route is great. The problem is at the same time he meets Mary, he also gets acquainted by the devil through his phone. I'm skipping a few steps because it's not really important here, but basically the main pro tag is a big deal, and now she's devising shit in the back to get him like, oh, be on my side. Mary's too much of like a positive influence, so the devil brings up like her own shit, her own pawn, her own piece to sway him back. And Seo is the pro tag's twin sister. They have like similar powers, but his is stronger. Their H scene also happens almost immediately, and it's also really long. There's this whole theme of trying to find their own happiness alongside like the danger of giving up and throwing it all away. It's a reference back to the Bluebird again and all that. So I went through like the order of the teacher, her name's Risa and Mary, and then Seo, because it felt like the proper order. I lucked out and it did feel like that was supposed to be the order, but honestly I just like Seo a lot, so I just left her last. I guess it's the best time to mention that each route kind of invests the first 3 or 4 sections to talk about the play. It's like, oh, here's how you act, this is the scenery, this is what we should do. The theater aspect is really lackluster. It's honestly probably the worst part of the VN in terms of quality. Sure, the H scenes are horrendously long, but I can understand there's like a fan base for it and it's really well done, so hey, they're happy, but the theater aspect was just too bland and the writing felt like someone that wanted to write about like a casino heist, but then he had to write about all these card games. Like, holy shit, why did I even do this? Another point of the play is the reference back to the couple parts of the original play where near the end of the route, almost every heroine goes like, fuck your bittersweet ending, I don't care if it makes the play better, I want things to work out for me. And it's like, I feel that. Anyways, Risa's route sucks ass and is completely irrelevant. You can even remove these 2 characters, basically nothing would change in the true route. They even had a set that could have been used because basically the idea was like, oh, she raped the guy. It was mainly glossed over. It's like you had something, you just didn't do anything with it. It's even joked about later on where a character is asking, it's like, what was even the point of this route? And the devil's like doing the eto bleh meme, and it says it's fun once in a while. Basically, this was the closest thing to a Nukage title in here, outside of like one of the extras. Honestly, I was probably more interested when I read Beamon, which is a Nukage title. The route was written by Ono, who wrote a couple of things, but I'm a huge fan of his latest work, Cyanotype. I think I talked about it before when I looked at his work, and he's constantly getting better, so I'm like super hyped of what else he's going to write next. But apparently this is the exception because I did not like it. But it does feel like they just asked him to do whatever, like how in Maeda's routes in Kanon, where it just felt like really random because the conversations of what the plot was like, kind of like very minimal from what I remember in interviews. Like Hasai or whatever his name is like, yeah, I'm doing this, is my project? And it's like, oh, you handle these 2 characters, and it seems like no one told Maeda what the thing's about, which is kind of fucked up. Anyways, going towards Mary's route, it's pretty middle of the road. There's nothing wrong with it, but anything brought up here is also not really used for the true route. There's sections near the end where you think it's like, okay, they're going to reuse this concept, this idea for the true route, but to get out like to trick the devil, whatever, to make them win and shit, it's like, it didn't really happen. It can be used as a pointer back to the original play, but I find Sayo handles that better. The idea is that these 2 kids find multiple birds, trying to like get them or release them because like, oh, we need this blue bird, but everything has like different reactions to them. Some of them die, some of them change color. So I guess the idea here is like, hey, it's using the same idea in different routes. In the end, it's fine. The route is fine. It's not something I'll remember, and it's been way better routes than like purple soft titles, but it's way better than Risa's route. Basically, she's like the haha, she's cute route. There's more to it, and it's like, oh, you can use her like bubbly personality to like juxtapose her shit into the last like couple sections in her route, and it works. But again, it's like, what was the point of her route if like her ideas aren't being used to the finale? Seo's route is kind of treated as one of the main routes. Technically, they're all main routes by the end in a sense, but there's more focus with Seo, and this time it's not even like the biased take, just because I like the character. This route is probably one of the shortest, but it's also never faffing around. There's a lot of cute sections, there's drama comes in sooner, and it ends in a way like, hey, it leads well to the true route, right? If anything, the title would have been a lot better plot-wise if it only had Seo and the true route, and slapped the rest as like the extras or fan discs. It'd be concise, you'd have like impactful moments at a steady pace. Basically, when I mentioned that this was like the FF13 of Purple Soft, this is what I meant. If you bought the title wanting like a decently darkish plot with maybe having the MC having some kind of mental breakdown, you'll be disappointed for a long ass while. Even then, it's not the greatest. I'm not going to talk about the true route. It's something better to be experienced yourself. It's not really like Chrono Clock where the true route makes all the previous routes even better. There's really no reason to talk about it this time around. You just have fun with it. It's kind of the main focus of the VN, and the references to the play start are like 3/4 of the way through. Before then, I felt like Seo's route was done better, but it's still fine. There's a lot of things going on for it. It's interesting. It's done well, and without it, I'd honestly say like, hey, it's better just to skip the whole title. Like, even though I like Seo's route, it's fine. Overall, the rating you get is depending on what you wanted from the title. If you expected more of a darkish plot as like an undertone for a title that had like a lot of H scenes, you'll be happy. I may even give it a 9. The art is great, but the audio mixing is kind of messy. I feel like one of the 3 updates that Neko or whatever fixed the audio issues on the H scenes where they were super loud than the rest, like compared to the rest of the VN. But there's still spots where they play like one track during like sad moments. I think it's always the same thing. And the problem is mainly the characters are really very down emotionally, or they're whispering, and the song is blaring. Not even that loud, but it's like, I can't hear you. What are you saying? Muramasa had that problem too by the finale, where all these like things were exploding and these talks like, I can't hear you. There's a text, but I can't hear. I'm sorry. And some Otome titles have the same thing, where it's like, let's play this really kind of loud song, and here's a wind like waving around, and these people are just whispering. It's like, I can't hear you. And you know, they're like, oh, this is gonna be emotional. It's like, maybe if I could hear them. I can't hear. Yeah. Anyways, let's say you came for the plot. Then it's close to a 6. I thought maybe I was too harsh on it until I saw like I gave Amatsusumi a 7, and I remember the reasons why I gave that 7. And basically, I can't put Aoi Tori at the same score, so I'm leaving it at 6. I am in the middle of like remaking my huge ass tier list, and ended up splitting between like a couple of them this time around. So one's like the overall, which is my normal one, and then one have like the hype section. And I feel like most people resonate with this one, or will resonate with that one, because like, oh, that's what makes sense. So in terms of hype, I can see putting this title as an 8, or maybe even close to a 9. People have different ideas how to rate stuff, but I'm not like a fan of overlooking a large chunk of the title just because like, hey, the last section was really cool. But in a different way, you can just look at it as like, hey, this is my score of Matsusumi, but 1 grade lower, and that's it. That'd be Aoi Tori. I think it's like the opposite of Happy May here, where for the first like 3/4, like, this is badass, this is fun. Maybe I don't like this character that much, or maybe our route wasn't all that impressive or even important, but I like what they're going for. And the finale or the true end's like, whatever. This is the opposite. This is like, and then Seo's like, hey, Seo's pretty good, and then it's like, oh, finale's also pretty good. But I remember like the first 8 hours, I'm just like crying, like, oh my, this is so boring. It's one of those types of VNs where the protag just doesn't have like a strong personality for me for a large part of the plot, right? Sure, this is actually explained this time around, where he sees himself more as like a tool due to some like trauma back in his past, but just because you have a reason doesn't make him all that more entertaining. This gets brought up again in the true route, where, and maybe a little bit in Seo's route, it's probably one of those only times where I found him fun to read about. The title could have gone to a different direction where the MC loses control of himself more often, and that could have covered like a different style of plot or a different type of plot, and even like different types of H scenes, but overall I felt like it was still playing it safe, and where the setting could have gotten wild with it. It's one of those things like, I think the missed potential also pissed me off.